Bullies torment the quiet new kid, then freeze when his hidden powers unleash. Vince and his friends had no idea who they were really dealing with when they cornered Elliot Chen behind the gym. 5 against 1 seemed like guaranteed victory until Elliot's body shifted from apparent vulnerability to perfect readiness in an instant. 7 years of Wing Chun training transformed the shy new student they'd tormented for weeks into a fighting machine, deflecting punches, redirecting attacks, and taking down his bullies one by one with precision strikes. As the last attacker fell, and the crowd of stunned onlookers grew, the social hierarchy of Westlake High School crumbled before their eyes. The quiet new kid had finally revealed his hidden power, and nothing would ever be the same again. Before we jump into this epic story, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, it helps me out a ton and lets me keep bringing you these amazing stories. Just take a second to subscribe. It costs nothing but means everything to me. I've got plenty more incredible stories coming your way, each one better than the last. Alright, let's get into today's mind-blowing tale. Elliot Chen stood motionless in front of his bathroom mirror, examining his reflection with resigned disappointment. At 15, he was painfully aware of every feature that made him stand out at Westlake High School. The slight pudge around his middle that his too large uniform couldn't quite hide, the thick-rimmed glasses that constantly slid down his nose, and the perpetually tousled black hair that refused to stay flat no matter how much he combed it. 3 weeks at his new school, and already he'd become intimately familiar with the sneers and whispers that followed him through the hallways. Just get through today, he told himself, squaring his shoulders. Just like Sifu taught you, patience above all else. Elliot's family had moved to Lakeside from San Francisco after his father accepted a teaching position at the local university. The relocation had torn Elliot away from his friends, his comfortable routine, and most importantly, from Master Wong's martial arts academy, where he'd spent the last 7 years training in Wing Chun Kung Fu. Back in San Francisco, he'd been on the verge of earning his advanced ranking. Here, he was just the chubby new Asian kid who kept to himself. His mother's voice called up the stairs. "Elliot, you'll be late." "Coming," he called back, grabbing his backpack and taking one final look in the mirror. No one at Westlake knew about his training. His parents had always emphasized humility, and Master Wong had drilled into him that true martial artists never flaunted their skills. "The best fight is the one you never have to engage in," his Sifu would say. Elliot had taken those words to heart, even as they became increasingly difficult to live by. The school bus was already halfway full when Elliot climbed aboard. He kept his eyes down, making his way toward the back where empty seats were still available. As he passed the middle section, a foot suddenly jutted into the aisle. Elliot saw it coming. His training had honed his reflexes to notice such things, but he deliberately stumbled over it anyway, catching himself on a nearby seat as laughter erupted around him. "Watch where you're walking, Sumo," said Vince. Harrington, the owner of the extended foot. Vince was a junior, the unquestioned alpha of Westlake's social hierarchy. With his perfectly styled blonde hair, Letterman jacket, and perpetual smirk, he embodied every stereotype of the high school. Golden boy, including the casual cruelty. Elliot said nothing, regaining his balance and continuing to the back of the bus. He slid into an empty seat, putting in his earbuds and turning up the volume on his phone, drowning out the continued snickers with the familiar rhythm of his training playlist, the same songs he used to practice his forms to back in San Francisco. Westlake High School loomed ahead, a sprawling brick building that housed just under 1,000 students. Established in 1967, it had the worn-in feel of a place that had seen generations pass through its halls. For most students, it was just another day. For Elliot, it was another gauntlet to run. The morning passed without incident. Elliot kept to himself in his classes, answering questions when called upon, but otherwise remaining invisible. His grades were good, excellent actually, but he deliberately held back, giving correct but minimal answers that wouldn't draw attention. It was during lunch period that the day took its first downturn. The cafeteria at Westlake was a large, echoing space with long tables arranged in neat rows. Elliot sat alone as usual, at the far end of a table near the windows. He'd just unwrapped the lunch his mother had packed, rice, stir-fried vegetables and dumplings in a sealed container, when shadows fell across his table. "What's that smell?" Vince's voice carried loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. He stood with his two constant companions, Darius Wells, a basketball player whose height made him look like he belonged in college rather than high school, and Tyler Kemp, a stocky wrestler with a buzz cut and perpetual scowl. Elliot kept his eyes on his food. "Just lunch?" Looks like bait for catching stray cats, Tyler said, leaning in and making an exaggerated gagging sound. Darius reached over and poked at one of the dumplings with a finger. What's in these things anyway? Dog meat? A faint heat rose in Elliot's cheeks, but he controlled his breathing just as he'd been taught. Center yourself, find your balance. They're vegetable dumplings, he said quietly. Speak up, Chen. Can't hear you, Vince said, leaning closer. They're vegetable dumplings, Elliot repeated louder this time. Oh, vegetable dumplings, Vince mimicked in a high-pitched, accented voice that sounded nothing like Elliot's perfectly normal American accent. Very special Chinese recipe. Yes? Several students at nearby tables had turned to watch now, some looking uncomfortable, others smirking in anticipation. None intervened. I'm going to eat now, Elliot said, keeping his voice even. Vince exchanged glances with his friends, then shrugged. Sure thing, Sumo, enjoy your dog food. They turned to leave, but as they did, Tyler deliberately bumped the table, causing Elliot's container to flip over. Rice scattered across the table and onto Elliot's lap, the dumplings rolling onto the floor. Oops, Tyler said with mock concern. Guess you'll have to catch another dog. The trio walked away laughing, high-fiving each other as they rejoined their usual table, where a group of cheerleaders sat waiting. Elliot sat motionless for a moment, feeling dozens of eyes on him. Then, methodically, he began cleaning up the mess, his movements precise and controlled. A cafeteria worker eventually came by with a mop and a sympathetic smile, but said nothing. Patience, Elliot reminded himself. This isn't the place. The afternoon brought Elliot's least favorite class, physical education. Today, Coach Brennan had set up a wrestling unit, pairing students for practice matches on mats spread across the gymnasium floor. Elliot's heart sank when he heard the instructions. Chen, you're with Kemp, Coach Brennan called out, checking names off his clipboard. Tyler's face split into a predatory grin as he made his way over to Elliot's mat. Ready to get squashed, Sumo? Elliot nodded silently, taking his position. He knew dozens of ways to take down an opponent Tyler's size, moves that utilized leverage and momentum rather than brute strength, moves that could send someone twice his weight crashing to the mat in seconds. But those techniques weren't part of standard high school wrestling, and using them would raise too many questions. So when the whistle blew, Elliot allowed himself to be overpowered, putting up just enough resistance to make it look like he was trying. Tyler was brutal, applying holds with unnecessary force, occasionally whispering taunts that only Elliot could hear. Like that, Sumo. Want some more? Elliot focused on his breathing, mentally detaching himself from the humiliation as Tyler finally pinned him to the mat. Kemp, ease up, Coach Brennan called from across the gym, having finally noticed the excessive force, but the match was already over, with Tyler standing triumphantly over Elliot. Better luck next time, Tyler said with a smirk, offering a hand that he pulled away at the last second when Elliot reached for it. More laughter from the students watching. By the end of the day, Elliot's patience was wearing thin. As he gathered books from his locker, he noticed a small figure being shoved against the wall several feet away. It was Max Feldman, a freshman, even smaller than Elliot, with wild curly hair and thick glasses. Vince had him cornered, with Darius and Tyler standing guard. Where's the math homework, Feldman? Vince was saying. Thought we had an arrangement. I didn't have time, Max stammered. My mum was sick and I had to... Excuses, Vince said, shoving Max harder against the lockers with a metallic clang. You know what happens when you don't deliver, right? Elliot found himself moving before he'd made a conscious decision. Hey, he said, his voice quiet but firm as he approached the group. Leave him alone. 4 pairs of eyes turned to him, in surprise. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Vince let out a laugh of pure disbelief. Are you serious right now, Sumo? You want some of this too? Elliot stood his ground. His name is Max. Mine is Elliot, and you should leave him alone. Vince exchanged incredulous glances with his friends, then stepped away from Max, turning his full attention to Elliot. Look at this, guys. Sumo's grown a backbone. Not worth it, man, Darius said, glancing around. Ms. Patel's classroom. Fizz right there. Vince considered this, then nodded. You're right, this isn't the place. He leaned in close to Elliot. But we're going to continue this conversation real soon, Sumo. Count on it. They stalked off, leaving Elliot and Max standing in the hallway. You shouldn't have done that, Max said, adjusting his glasses nervously. They're just going to make it worse for you now. Elliot shrugged. It's fine. They leave most people alone after a while, you know. Once they get bored. Max looked at Elliot with a mixture of gratitude and concern. But they won't get bored. If you challenge them. I'll be fine, Elliot repeated. See you tomorrow, Max. As Elliot walked home that afternoon, he'd missed the bus while helping Max gather his scattered belongings. He replayed the events of the day in his mind. For the first time since arriving at Westlake, he wondered if his Sifu's advice about avoiding conflict was really applicable here. These weren't random street thugs looking for a fight. They were persistent tormentors who took his passivity as an invitation to escalate. That evening, Elliot found himself in the garage, which he'd converted into a makeshift training space. A worn punching bag hung in one corner, and he'd cleared enough space in the center for forms practice. As he moved through the familiar patterns, his body remembered what his mind sometimes forgot. He was not helpless. Far from. Their Wing Chun wasn't about brute strength or flashy kicks. It was a practical, efficient fighting system developed for self-defense, particularly for those at a physical disadvantage. Elliot had been drawn to it precisely because it didn't require exceptional strength or height. It used an opponent's energy against them. He struck the bag with precise, rapid-fire punches, visualizing Vince's smirking face. Chain punches, quick succession, control your breathing. Elliot! He stopped mid-form, turning to see his father standing in the doorway. Everything okay, son? His father's brow was furrowed with concern. You're hitting that bag pretty hard. Elliot lowered his hands. Just practicing. His father stepped into the garage, closing the door behind him. Your mother and I have noticed you've been quiet since we moved here. Is school going all right? For a moment, Elliot considered telling his father everything. About Vince and his friends, about the daily humiliations, about how hard it was to follow the principle of non-engagement when the bullies refused to leave him alone. But his father had enough to worry about, adjusting to his new position at the university. It's fine, Dad, just the usual new kid stuff. His father didn't look convinced. You know what Master Wong always said about fighting being the last resort, Elliot finished. I remember. Not just that, his father said, placing a hand on Elliot's shoulder. He also said that sometimes standing your ground is necessary. The key is knowing when that time has come. He squeezed Elliot's shoulder. Just remember who you are, son. You're stronger than you look in more ways than one. Elliot nodded, grateful for the words even if his father didn't know their full context. Now come inside. Your mother's made your favorite. The next day at school, Elliot could feel something had changed. Word had spread about his confrontation with Vince, and other students were looking at him differently, some with newfound respect, others with concern, as if he'd painted a target on his back. Max found him before first period. Hey, he said, falling into step beside Elliot. Just wanted to say thanks again for yesterday. Elliot smiled. No problem. But seriously, Max continued, lowering his voice, you should watch your back. Vince doesn't let things go, especially when someone makes him look bad in front of people. As if summoned by his name, Vince appeared at the end of the hallway, flanked as always by Darius and Tyler. His eyes locked on Elliot, and the smirk that spread across his face sent a clear message: this isn't over. Throughout the morning, Elliot caught glimpses of the trio watching him. Between classes, during breaks, even through the windows of classrooms as he passed by, they were tracking his movements, waiting for the right moment. That moment came during lunch. Elliot had just sat down, alone again, though Max had given him a friendly wave from across the cafeteria when Vince and his friends surrounded his table. Afternoon, Sumo, Vince said, placing both palms on the table and leaning in. Or should I call you Elliot, since you're so big on using proper names now? Elliot met his gaze steadily. Elliot works. Vince's smile didn't reach his eyes. Here's the thing, Elliot. Yesterday you stuck your nose where it doesn't belong, and that creates a problem for me. See, people around here know not to interfere with my business. It's like an unwritten rule. Maybe it's a bad rule, Elliot said quietly. A flash of anger crossed Vince's face. You don't decide that, I do. He straightened up. Anyway, I'm willing to let it slide this once since you're new and obviously don't know how things work here. All you have to do is apologize publicly, and we can forget the whole thing. The cafeteria had gone oddly quiet. Elliot realized that many of the surrounding tables were watching the exchange, waiting to see what would happen. The best fight is the one you never have to engage in. Master Wong's voice echoed in his mind. But another voice, his father's, countered, sometimes standing your ground is necessary. Elliot took a deep breath. I'm not going to apologize for stopping you from hurting someone. Vince's expression hardened. Wrong answer. He glanced at Tyler and Darius. Looks like someone needs a more hands-on lesson about how things work at Westlake. The first warning sign was when all three of them followed Elliot after the final bell. He headed toward his locker, acutely aware of their presence 20 feet behind him. The hallways were rapidly emptying as students rushed to catch buses or head to after-school activities. Elliot calmly gathered his books, closed his locker, and turned to face them. "Do we have a problem?" "Yeah, we have a problem," Vince said, stepping forward. The hallway was now deserted, except for the four of them. "You embarrassed me yesterday, twice, and now you've refused a very generous offer to make things right." Elliot remained still, assessing the situation with the tactical awareness his training had instilled in him. Vince was directly in front of him, with Tyler to his right and Darius to his left, creating a semicircle that blocked his path forward. The lockers were at his back, not an ideal position. "I don't want any trouble," Elliot said, meaning it. Despite everything, he still hoped to resolve this without violence. "Should have thought of that before," Vince replied. He nodded to his friends. "Hold him." Darius and Tyler moved forward, each grabbing one of Elliot's arms. Their grips were tight, painful, meant to intimidate as much as restrain. Elliot allowed it, remaining passive for the moment. Vince stepped closer. "Let's see if we can explain Westlake's social hierarchy in terms you'll understand." The first punch was aimed at Elliot's stomach, not full force but hard enough to hurt. Elliot tensed his abdominal muscles instinctively, a reaction trained into him over years of conditioning. Vince noticed the resistance and frowned. "Tougher than you look, huh? Let's try again." The second punch was harder, directed at the same spot. This time Elliot couldn't entirely suppress a grunt of pain. Vince smiled. "There we go. Now here's the deal, Sumo. I'm at the top of the food chain here. You're at the bottom. That means when I say jump, you—" "Hey!" A shout echoed down the hallway. All four boys turned to see Mr. Kendrick, the history teacher, striding toward them, his face flushed with anger. What the hell is going on here? Darius and Tyler immediately released Elliot, stepping back with practiced innocence. "Nothing, Mr. K," Vince said smoothly. "Just having a conversation with our new friend." Mr. Kendrick looked between them skeptically, his gaze lingering on Elliot. "Is that true, Mr. Chen?" Elliot hesitated, weighing his options. Confirming Vince's story would avoid immediate consequences, but would mark him as easy prey going forward. Telling the truth might bring temporary protection, but would label him a snitch, potentially making things worse in the long run. "We were just talking," Elliot said finally, his voice neutral. Mr. Kendrick didn't look convinced. "All of you on your way. Now, if I see anything like this again, it's straight to Principal Garvey's office." The three bullies moved off, with Vince shooting Elliot a final look that clearly said, "This isn't over." As Elliot walked home that afternoon, a sense of inevitability settled over him. The confrontation in the hallway hadn't been resolved, merely postponed. Vince had been humiliated by Mr. Kendrick's intervention, and he would be looking to reassert his dominance at the first opportunity. For the first time since moving to Lakeside, Elliot deliberately sought out a secluded spot in the town park and spent an hour running through his most advanced forms. No longer practice, but preparation. Center yourself, find your balance, be ready. The weekend passed quietly. Elliot helped his parents around the house, finished his homework, and continued his daily training in the garage. He didn't mention the incidents at school, but he couldn't shake the feeling that a threshold had been crossed. Monday would bring a reckoning. He wasn't wrong. The morning was deceptively normal. Elliot attended his classes, ate lunch alone, though Max waved to him again a bit more openly this time, and made it through most of the day without incident. It was during the last period, study hall, which Vince and his friends also had, that he received a folded note. "Behind the gym, after school. Come alone, or Feldman gets what you're avoiding." Elliot calmly refolded the note and slipped it into his pocket. Across the room, Vince was watching him, that same predatory smile on his face. When the final bell rang, Elliot texted his mother that he would be staying late for a study group. Then he made his way to the area behind the gymnasium, a secluded space between the school building and the football field, hidden from view by a row of equipment sheds. They were waiting for him, not just Vince, Darius, and Tyler, but two other boys from the football team whose names Elliot didn't know. 5 against 1. The odds weren't good even with his training. "You actually showed," Vince said, sounding pleased. "Braver than I gave you credit for, Sumo." Elliot set his backpack down carefully. "What do you want, Vince?" "What do I want?" Vince spread his arms wide. "I want things back the way they were. I want you to know your place. I want you to be an example of what happens when someone steps out of line at my school." "Your school?" Elliot repeated quietly. "That's right, my school." Vince gestured to his friends. "These guys, they get it. Everyone gets it, except you." Elliot took a deep breath, centering himself. "I'm giving you one chance to walk away, all of you. There was a moment of stunned silence before the group erupted in laughter. "Did you hear that?" Vince asked incredulously. "He's giving us a chance to walk away." He wiped an imaginary tear from his eye. "That's priceless." Elliot remained still, his posture relaxed but alert. "I mean it." The laughter died down, replaced by a tense silence. "You... know what? I've had enough of this," Vince said, his amusement transforming into anger. "Teach him a lesson, guys, and make sure it sticks." Darius and one of the football players moved forward first. Elliot waited until they were within striking distance, then suddenly shifted his weight, his body transitioning from apparent vulnerability to perfect readiness in an instant. The first punch never landed. Elliot deflected Darius's arm with a quick, precise movement, redirecting the momentum so that Darius stumbled forward off balance. Simultaneously, Elliot's palm shot out in a short, powerful strike to the football player's solar plexus, not hard enough to cause serious damage, but sufficient to drive the air from his lungs and send him staggering backward. The entire sequence took less than 2 seconds. The remaining bullies froze, momentarily shocked by the unexpected display of skill. "What the hell?" Tyler muttered. Elliot resumed his ready stance, his breathing controlled, his movements economical. 7 years of training had transformed his body into a precision instrument, and for the first time at Westlake, he was allowing that fact to show. "I'd really prefer not to fight," Elliot said calmly, "but I will defend myself." Vince's face contorted with rage. "Get him, all of you!" They rushed him at once, a tactical mistake. Elliot moved with fluid grace, years of drills and sparring sessions guiding his responses. He deflected rather than blocked, redirected rather than absorbed, turned his opponent's aggression and momentum against them. A quick trap and palm strike sent Tyler sprawling. A precise kick to the back of the knee dropped the second football player. A series of rapid chain punches drove Darius back, his arms raised defensively. It was over in less than a minute. 4 of the 5 attackers were on the ground, or had retreated to a safe distance, nursing various minor injuries. Bruised ribs, a bloody nose, wounded pride. Only Vince remained standing directly in front of Elliot, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. What the hell are you?" he demanded. Elliot took a controlled breath. "Just someone who asked to be left alone." His voice was steady, without a trace of the anger or fear that might be expected after such a confrontation. A small crowd had gathered at the edge of the area, students who had heard the commotion or followed out of curiosity. Among them, Elliot spotted Max, whose expression shifted from concern to astonishment as he took in the scene. Vince noticed the audience too, his face flushed with humiliation as he realized how many witnesses there were to his defeat. "This isn't over," he spat, backing away. "Yes, it is," Elliot replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We're done here." As Vince and his friends retreated, the onlookers began to disperse, some whispering excitedly to each other, others casting newfound looks of respect toward Elliot. Max approached cautiously. "That was incredible," he said. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Elliot picked up his backpack, slinging it over one shoulder. "Wing Chun Kung Fu. Been training since I was 8. And you just let them push you around for weeks when you could do that?" Max gestured to where the bullies had been. Elliot shrugged. "My Sifu, my teacher, always said fighting should be the last resort. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this." They began walking back toward the main building together. "So what happens now?" Max asked. It was a good question. Elliot had just shattered his carefully maintained image of harmlessness, and by tomorrow, everyone at Westlake would know what had happened behind the gym. "Now," Elliot said, "I think things will be different." He was right. The change was immediate and dramatic. By the next morning, the story had spread throughout the school, growing more elaborate with each retelling. In some versions, Elliot had knocked out all 5 attackers with single strikes. In others, he'd performed acrobatic feats worthy of a martial arts film. The truth was impressive enough without embellishment, but high school rumor mills rarely dealt in unadorned facts. When Elliot entered the school building, conversations paused and heads turned. The hallway didn't exactly part for him, but there was a newfound space around him as he walked to his locker. No one blocked his path. No one whispered insults as he passed. Vince and his friends were conspicuously absent from their usual spots. Elliot later heard they'd claimed to be homesick, though everyone knew the real reason for their absence. Pride could suffer more lasting damage than bruises. At lunch, Elliot had just sat down at his usual solitary table when Max appeared, tray in hand. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Elliot smiled. Not at all. They were soon joined by Sarah Ung, a quiet girl from Elliot's calculus class, and then by Jason Wright, who shared his chemistry lab table. By the end of the lunch period, Elliot was sitting with a small group of students who, like him, had previously kept to themselves either by choice or necessity. "So is it true you're like a kung fu master or something?" Jason asked between bites of his sandwich. Elliot shook his head. "Not a master, just a student. I still have a lot to learn." "Could you teach some of it?" Sarah asked. "Self-defense, I mean." The question caught Elliot by surprise. I suppose I could show some basics." "That would be awesome," Max said enthusiastically. "We could start a club or something." The idea took root. By the end of the week, Elliot had spoken with Mr. Kendrick, who agreed to sponsor an after-school self-defense group. The history teacher had heard the rumors about what happened behind the gym, and while he didn't condone fighting, he recognized the value in teaching students to protect themselves. Vince and his friends eventually returned to school, noticeably subdued. They gave Elliot a wide berth, avoiding eye contact when they passed in the hallways. The hierarchy had been disrupted, and they were still adjusting to the new reality. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Elliot was organizing equipment in the gym for the self-defense group's third meeting when a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. "Hey," Vince said, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his usual swagger noticeably absent. Elliot straightened, instantly alert. "Hey." Vince took a few steps into the gym, then stopped, maintaining a cautious distance. "Heard about this thing you're doing, teaching people to fight." "Self-defense," Elliot corrected. "Not fighting. There's a difference." Vince nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess there is." He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, about what happened, we don't need to talk about it," Elliot interrupted, surprising himself. He'd spent weeks being tormented by this person, yet somehow the anger had faded, replaced by something like pity. Vince, for all his bluster, was just a teenager trying to find his place, same as everyone else. "I was out of line," Vince continued, as if compelled to get the words out. "Way out of line. With you, with Feldman, with a lot of people." He took a deep breath. "I'm not asking to be friends or anything. Just a clean slate, maybe." Elliot studied him for a moment, searching for signs of insincerity. Finding none, he nodded. "Clean slate." Vince looked relieved. He gestured to the equipment Elliot had been setting up. "So this self-defense thing, you taking new people?" The question hung in the air between them, laden with implications. Elliot thought of what his Sifu would say, about growth, about change, about the true purpose of martial arts being not to defeat others, but to improve oneself. 7 o'clock, Elliot said finally. "Don't be late." Vince nodded, the ghost of his old smile returning, though without the cruelty that had previously accompanied it. "I won't." As Vince left, Elliot resumed setting up, reflecting on how much had changed in a few short weeks. He'd arrived at Westlake as an outsider, determined to remain invisible. Now he'd found not only his voice but his place, not through dominance or fear, but through standing up for himself and others. His father had been right. There comes a time when standing your ground becomes necessary. The key was doing so without compromising who you are. That evening, as students began arriving for the self-defense class, a diverse group that now included some former bullies alongside their previous targets, Elliot felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond the validation of his fighting skills. He'd changed something at Westlake, disrupted a toxic pattern, created a space where strength could be used to protect rather than intimidate. Master Wong would have approved. "The true measure of a martial artist isn't in the fights they win," he used to say, "but in the fights they prevent." As Elliot called the group to attention, guiding them through the first basic stance of Wing Chun, he silently thanked his Sifu for that wisdom. It had taken him a while to understand it fully, but now he did. True strength wasn't about dominating others, but about having the courage to stand up for what's right, the discipline to use power responsibly, and the wisdom to know when to fight and when to extend a hand instead. At Westlake High School, the quiet new kid had finally found his voice, and everyone, including the former bullies, was better for it. Wow, if you made it this far, I know you enjoyed this incredible story. Please hit that subscribe button right now. I'm literally begging you. Your subscription is all I need to keep going. Come on, it takes just 1 second to click but means everything to me. I promise I'll keep delivering mind-blowing stories like this one if you just subscribe. Seriously, I'm on my knees here. Subscribe now. Don't forget to hit the notification bell too so you never miss my next upload. Leave a comment below telling me what you thought, and I'll see you in the next amazing story. Please subscribe.